To the, I always wanted to say the Rick Padgett show. I guess that sounds okay, but what we're going to talk about, what we're going to talk about tonight, hey, it's your America. It doesn't belong to government. It's yours. It's mine. It's all of us together. And in thinking about these things that are going on in our country today, and even on a local level, the biggest questions that we have is who's running the show? Do we know? I don't. Well, we know who's not. We know who's sitting in the position like they're running the show, but we know that. As the things that we can talk about everything in under the sun right now about things aren't being done because nothing's being done. So it's kind of Katie bar the door, pick whatever, spin the wheel, make the deal. That's how they run the government right now. So what we want to talk about a little bit is in turn is just the school board races. So in saying so, you guys, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves if you would, and tell them a little bit about who you are and how we do things.
Pastor, of course, you first.
All right, no problem. I'm Pastor Demencio. Literally, I just ran for Orange County School Board here in Central Florida. I did not win that race, but what came out of that is a whole lot of stuff. We've had right now our state, meaning that the Secretary of State level and the Department of Education and the Supervisor of Elections have all gotten involved in at least 6 to 8 of our counties, which includes my county, which are saying that there's been some bad voting practices, cheating going on in our state, and also even down to even with my own personal election. After the election was over with, on that Friday, the incumbent that I was running against, who is a very well-known rhino, what it is she literally announced that her campaign had used the parental emails from Orange County Public Schools, which is against the law. So right now we have a lot of interesting things going on in our state. And even with that, my own race is not really over with now because we have to find out what the Supervisor of Elections and the Secretary of State is going to decide. But that's a little bit of a snippet.
Are you kind of surprised by any of that? Are you shocked?
No. No, not really. But this time we had a lot of eyes on the ground on this one. I must admit, I think in our county alone, we had about 2,000 eyes on the ground as far as watchers. We have all of the different background checks that we have with the Republican Party and with a lot of different separate groups joining together. There was one thing I must admit in our state, there's a real good cohesion of efforts to make sure or ensure voter integrity.
Right. And I grew up, my uncle used to always kid. He'd say, always be honest. And I'd say, oh, yeah, that's the way to be. He said, now cheat them right now. Cheat them right. And I'd look at him, I'd go, I understand that meaning now, cheat them right. Because, that's exactly what they do. So, I mean, it's amazing what we learn as we get older and we actually get into. I tell people all the time, you don't know politics until you run for office. Yeah. You get into it, and then you find out that before you even sign the line or put the dotted line out there to everybody see it, they're already in the back rooms spinning the wheels, making the deals, meeting with all the groups, the coordinators of their groups, trading off candidates like they're playing poker. Well, if you endorse him, I'll endorse him. If you endorse that one, I'll endorse that. And that's before they even know who's running. They know that what they got running, but they're not interested in anybody else that comes along. And I'll say this, it kind of gets controversial, I guess, but it's kind of the deep state mindset. What the public don't know won't hurt them. Kind of is what it is. But anyway, Michael, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
No, I agree with you about the deep state. I mean, we've all experienced that to some extent. As for myself, let me give a little background real quick. I've been a political commentator for over 15 years now. I think actually I'm at 17 years that I've been doing this. Former Marine. I've run for Congress in 2014. I ran for county executive, not county executive, legislator, county legislator in 2020. I forget sometimes. And I sit on a couple of civic engagement boards at local institutions in my community in Southern Tier of New York. But mostly I focus on political commentary, speaking to all of the politicians of every single party throughout all of New York State, in Washington, D.C., and across the country, and covering all the issues that matter to everyone in a little bit more depth than the major news media, because they have a bias, they have a objective, and they're not even honest about it. And that's the big thing. And schools are a massive issue right now. What's happening in our schools, how they're affecting our kids, the things that they are doing to our children. We're not even going to see the results of this for 10 years. And that's the reason why we have to pay attention today. What we let happen in our schools right now, in 10 years, that's what they're going to be voting on. Those 8-year-olds are going to be 18 and voting. Have they been indoctrinated? Have they been programmed? What have they been taught? I think it's critical people vote in these elections. I hope you do get elected, Pastor, because it's important to have people who are looking forward and saying, hang on, I want a critical thinker as my next generation, not someone who's programmed to just go, I obey. Yes, check the box because that's what I was told to do.
That's right.
Right. It gets back to me. Is we got to get away from all the crazy issues, figuring out a who, she, him, and all that. We need to get back to the reading, writing, and arithmetic. We've got to get back to the basics, and until we that, we're and the thing is for years this has been going on, and for me working in the school system, I took that on as took over a group of the school resource officers. Prior to that, we called it off duty on your extra time working in the schools where you built relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Then somebody comes and said, hey, let's make money off of this, and we're going to call this a school resource officer program, and we'll coordinate the efforts. We'll get a lot of money and everything. But you know what they started doing is just like community policing within the school. It wasn't anything new. They just put a title on it and organized it to bring it into the schools like it was something new. It's basic. It's a basic process. It's how you speak to people. It's how you treat people. How you explain things to people, and you explain and you teach people, because those young minds are like sponges. If you give them something, they will absorb it at a certain point. But say you can talk 100% of the time, but the average person's only going to remember 10%, maybe, if you're lucky, what you had to say. So as these kids are growing, they become these sponges, and they do get older. And if they're only learning 10% and a little bit later on, no matter what that 10% is, it builds a baseline of what establishes where their education starts. And when we as adults quit talking and we allow people to talk for us as parents, we have a bigger issue in the system, because it's kind of like, if nobody is talking to your child, if you're not, somebody is. You better worry about what they're telling them.
Yeah, I mean, when you were saying that, you made me think about a very simple point. It's like this here. For me, when I'm looking at a lot of this, it's a very big experiment that's being held with our children. They are taking our children and having unproven theories, everything. I mean, come on. Everything from the gender thing, how much is it going to traumatize these girls to have boys hanging like they hanging, walking into locker rooms, walking into bathrooms? There is no privacy. The impact on these kids of these philosophies, and I'm just going to say these philosophies of devils. I mean, this is some crazy stuff that people are trying. And the thing about it that is funny is this: it's taken thousands of years of world history to get to what they maligned and called traditional family values, because those traditional values worked. But within less than a couple of generations, they're trying to test theories that were already proven for hundreds of years not to work. We have to have people who think right in office. If we do not elect them, it's shame on us, because at least in America, for now, our vote really does matter.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And that's the big thing. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I would just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what both you, Rick, and what the pastor are saying. It's not just like Loudoun County, where we've already seen,
Mhm.
and let's be very clear here. What's the impact to our kids trying to have them chop off their genitals? Well, it's not just that. It's also when we have individuals who take advantage of that system and the loopholes it creates,
Right.
and they assault other students. And we've seen that. Loudoun County was very clear in the details on this, where we not only did it happen once, they covered it up, moved the kid to another school, and he did it again. And by the way, he's been convicted. So it's not a question of did he do this? He did. He's
I
been
know that story.
convicted of the
Yes.
crime of assaulting multiple young women because of his claims taking advantage of this social experiment. But the experiment
Mhm.
isn't just there. See, they're adding to the confusion, and that's the worst thing we can introduce, I think, to
Mhm.
kids because they are sponges and they are picking up all of these life lessons on how they interact, and we're making muddy the waters that they're trying to swim through because it's not just, oh, your gender. No, no, no. It's entirely different than what you think it is. And we're going to make
Wow.
it dangerous for
Just
you. But
wow.
also, they're saying math is racist. Math,
Oh,
numbers, are
yeah, I've never understood that. You know.
science, which is
Crazy.
the application of questions on the observable facts in our universe. That's somehow racist. You know, the sun is somehow racist. I don't know what race it is, but it's racist somehow. And
Oh
now
yeah.
they're adding in yet another new thing to this. I don't know if you guys have heard about this.
Good.
Equitable grading. Have you heard about
Oh
that?
yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
I've heard about that one. That's grading on a curve taken to a whole nother different level.
Well, they're
It's
doing. Well, I was going
Go
to say
ahead.
they're doing this in Illinois. They're introducing it into California. It's going to be coming to New York State very soon because New
Mhm.
York State is just as progressive, and they're trying to
Mhm.
slip it into a lot of teachers are already using this in schools. It is essentially so it piggybacks off of critical race theory. So white people are evil, black people or people of color are victims, and the only one who can help any of them are
Right.
government elites that are going to micromanage your life. And on
Yes.
that principle, then or that application, there's equitable grading that says that, well, because of the color of your skin, you don't have to do homework on time. You get a bump on your grades. You can only be taught in segregated classes by segregated teachers. And we have to give you additional bonuses just because you exist with the color of skin that you have. And by the way, if you have the wrong skin color, which by the way, Rick, you're the one they're talking about, then you get
Yeah.
punished. You don't get any of the advantages that have been given to everyone else. Matter of fact, they take away things from you. So you're going to be graded more harshly, not
Right.
equally,
Mhm.
more harshly. You're going to be given no opportunities. Everything's going to be expected of you in a greater amount. And meanwhile, everyone else is getting lax. And the last thing that's part of this wonderful wonderkind idea that came out of Harvard University is, and we're going to put all of the kids in the same class. So there's no more advanced classes. If you're good at math, doesn't matter. You're in the
It's
same
worse.
math class as the kid who
Right.
doesn't
Right.
understand calculus, doesn't understand trigonometry, and you're going to be taught all of them the same class material. So if that kid doesn't understand calculus, he's in the same class as the kid who does understand it. Who's benefiting here? One kid's being held back, one kid's still confused. Where's that
Mm.
classroom going? This is the next generation. We have completely confused them on every level, from being responsible and being able to meet deadlines, from being able to absorb the materials that are in front of them, to understand what it is to excel, what it is to be rewarded for excelling. And you don't even know what gender you are. How much confusion can we give a child? And we're talking about kids from ages 5 to 18.
Mm.
So, no, just lost your audio, Rick, your audio.
Rory says we're not broadcasting live.
I was gonna say it's saying we're live, so
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'm back. I'm muted. I was talking to Rory on there trying to get him. It says we're live.
yeah.
So I mean, so
But
I
you're
don't know.
recording.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
You're
yeah.
recording. As long as you're
Yeah.
recording it as well, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Worst case,
Because
you
that was a
can-
good parlay. That was a good parlay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. Because I mean, bottom line is the truth. What we're talking about is the truth, and that in a nutshell. Because you know, just I do the YouTube channels and I do a lot of guest speaking and I go out things like that, and I just become more interested in doing something like this because YouTube and all that is great, but it doesn't get that live feed. It doesn't get that interaction that we need to
Yeah.
to educate not only ourselves but other people. Because I don't always pretend that I have all the answers, but I can tell you what, I'll figure out what they are, but you won't snow me with the real answer. And it's just kind of like, and I've said this before. You go out there and you talk to folks, and they'll tell you their side of it. And I sit there and I listen to some of these people, and I think they really believe what they're saying. Either they're making it up or they're making it up. Somebody's
Yeah.
got to make it up and get it started. And you're thinking, and then it doesn't matter what you do. There's always that little left wing spin that takes over, and before you know it, this thing's growing legs, and this legs is just growing and growing, and you're looking at it going, where the heck did that all come from? And all it takes is one person that's uneducated and doesn't understand it to go out and educate the uneducated.
I can tell
But
you
see,
why.
listen right here. I'll tell y'all something. I'm also an engineer. I've done a lot of work with college students, high school students. I've done them whether it was ministry wise or secular and youth programs and all this other stuff. When you look a lot about what's going on, I'm going to tell you one of the things I really believe is the most detrimental parts for our schools, for education, just period. And Michael, you hit on it real heavy when you were saying some of what you were saying, and when you guys are talking about everybody starts getting put into one class. That's middle of the road mentality on steroids. If you think about it, politically, most people feel that it's the best and most proper way to be middle of the road. If I'm in the middle and I'm not too far to the right, I'm not too far to the left, I'm okay. But that pot is destroying our nation. That middle uncommitted level where nobody gets to be better than the other one, no one gets to be worse. Everybody is in this socialistic Marxist utopia of nothingness. It's just like, no one can win the race. Everybody must stay inside of that box. It took generations fighting wars for us to get unboxed so that you could be all that you could be and so that you can have a chance at a future. I mean, it's like it's gone into the level of insanity right now, what's going on. I'm looking, and when you say like, okay, get rid of gifted programs, getting rid of gifted programs, kids that have earned the right to be ahead of the curve, you're doing something wrong if you're doing it, because that is what was that word they call it? You're entitled.
The
Yeah.
entitlement,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, entitled. But wait a minute, isn't that just being smart? And now you got the kids that, quite frankly speaking, I don't care what your race is, whether it's because you didn't do your work or you have some challenges. If you're not making the grades, you don't get bumped up. In our state, now in the nation, it's even worse, but in our state of Florida, it's actually, we were looking at numbers where 90 some odd % of our students were being graduated, and only about, this was the numbers, the system numbers, about 55 odd % after COVID were actually grade level.
Not surprised by that.
What do you expect? And now these are going to be your new mayors, your new body mechanics, your new engineers, your new doctors. Oh, did y'all also hear this even about college? They're trying to get away with that harshness of you must make that upper tier A or definitely at least that high tier B for med school.
You know, they don't think this through.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with all of this is, I'll give you an example. In LA, they have the
Mm-hmm.
same problem in LA because there is a LA city councilman who's facing the same thing about equitable grading, some of this mixing of students together and getting rid of advanced classes. And the reason why they're trying to get rid of that, you ready for this? Because it's racially insensitive. LA County is 90% Black and Hispanic. And his answer is, who are you being racist against by having Black and Hispanic students in an advanced class because they earned it? And
You're
now
right.
add in more qualifications and more divisions. And this is happening, and I want people who are watching, we're talking about North Carolina, New York State, Florida, and I have some knowledge of other states like Illinois, California. This, no matter where you are, you're in the center of America or you're on the edges, it's hitting you. This is what's being done. And this is getting into our schools because of the school boards, where no one is paying attention. It's one of the least paid attention to elections. I mean, you almost never see it in the newspapers. You almost never hear about it on the talk radio programs. Almost none of the candidates ever get airtime. And this is a problem because then they get in and you don't know what they're looking to do. So when they suddenly go, hey, I believe in, I'm part of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow or BLM, Citizen Action, all these various far left organizations. And they're like, I want to be racially sensitive and we have to do equitable grading. Otherwise, you're a racist. The rest of the board is like, I don't want to be called a racist. Okay. Yeah, we're going to teach critical race theory, the applications of critical race theory. We're going to teach all the kids in 5th grade. This literally happened in the southern tier of New York. Okay. And there was a huge outrage. We screamed at our school board about this, literally because you could see, the parents could finally see what was going on in the classrooms. They were doing the remote learning. And a parent got to watch as a teacher teaching 5-year-olds was reading one of these Kendi books, Ibrahim Kendi, one of his books. And it was teaching the kid, police are evil, white people are evil, and Black people are victims. This is a book that's being taught to a 5-year-old. And the teacher started it off with the statement, I apologize because I was born in a city where there weren't a whole lot of other people. And I apologize for being white and not mixing with others. This is what 5-year-olds are getting taught. Because no one ever asked a question about the school board, nor did they know who was in there. This is important, folks. This is really important to our future.
Well, I tell you, it's really interesting because when you're talking about the school boards, I mean, when you go across the board, have you ever heard what's the gentleman Evan Sayat, where he talks about the kindergarten of Eden?
No, I haven't heard about that.
It's kind of like it's the book like that, and the way it's self-described says, with this book, the spot between Alan Bloom and Thomas Sowell has now been filled. The thing about it talks about it's once a liberal, always a liberal. I'm a liberal. He's liberal. They're liberal. Wouldn't you like to be a liberal too? Kind of remember the old song that we had on commercials.
Right.
And when you read this book, and you read the book, and it says like one title is "Gee, this evil tastes so good," and that's kind of the concept that when you look at it, and what to do when there's nothing to do. If you got nothing on your agenda, what do you do? I mean, a lot of these times people sit back and they think that the more radical they become, the more significant they become to society. and it causes their ego to take off. Hold on. And we've got Chad Stahl getting ready to join us. Let me get him in here real quick.
Sure.
Mhm.
Hey, Chad, welcome aboard, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Great. Nice to have you here. Like I said, we run our show from 7 to 9. I'll put it in there, and it's like I try to make it convenient for anybody. Stop in when you can. If you can't, that's fine. But what we've had a pretty good run on some of the conversations that we've been having about school boards, how they react and what's going on. And I tell you, it's interesting. And Pastor Barton there, he was in the middle of a race down in Florida, so he gets crazy on some of the things that's been going on with his race. And Michael here, he's been around commentary, and he's done it all in the media for the last 15 years or so.
15, 17, somewhere in there.
So it could be 20. He's just probably not telling us the 20. Round up, Michael. Right? So I admit it.
I got enough gray.
There you go. There you go. I somebody said that mine was turning gray one day, and I said, no, it's turning loose. Gray's got nothing to do with it. And so I went on vacation, and this is kind of funny. Went on vacation and probably took off and on in between a 30-day period, but took probably 3 weeks of vacation that time. And I haven't cut my hair since I come back. So everybody's looking at me like, wow, you got hair. I said, yeah, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? But it almost makes me feel kind of scary. It's like all this hair. I said, now I got to go get a haircut. Maybe I should keep. My wife's got, no, it needs to come off. I'm like, dang it. At least I lost that battle right out of the chute, didn't I? So anyway, I know I got sidetracked on that. It was just one of the funny stories. So Chad, tell us about what you got going on in the race and how it's turning, and give us a little idea about you and what you're looking to do, and even feel free to talk about your challengers concepts and stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's I'm in Raleigh, so we're in Wake County, North Carolina, and my district is District 6, so it's kind of like part of the downtown Raleigh, part of North Hills. If you're familiar, it kind of runs up Six Forks Road towards Sawmill, and then kind of tucks back towards Edwards Mill, Glenwood, that area there.
A lot of good restaurants over there.
Oh yeah. They just keep on coming. They just keep on coming.
They do.
Keep on coming. But it's funny. I ran into one of our neighbors maybe a week ago. She was doing a lot of the flipping in our neighborhood, and I asked him. I said, are you having a hard time finding staff and keeping staff and maintaining like a steady staff? And he was like, oh yeah, no, we're all suffering, and it's I think that's a real thing that so many businesses are dealing with.
Oh yeah.
I think if you rewind the clock and you think about what's going on in school systems across the nation and the change of pace that they've let go of mastering skills, and it's just, lesson after lesson after lesson. Students they're taught to just shift. They're not taught, hey, sit still, do this work, master this work, be the best at this work, and then let that carry you through life. They're taught to shift over and over and over again. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing a lot of that residual. This isn't good enough. That's not good enough. This isn't good enough. So you just see a lot of shifting, Rick. So we're small business owners. We have a 9-year-old. So just watching the staffing, interviewing Wake County graduates, we see it on the back end after grade 12. And I think that education tries to live in a bubble where, we're teaching the lessons, we're doing this, we're doing that. So we're fulfilling our duty to society, and that bubble, it needs to bust, because the kids on the back end of grade 12, that's where they're suffering, and there's no tracking mechanism. So you can preach proficiency, you can preach lesson planning, you can do all of that stuff that you want, but if there's no reward for your kids after grade 12, then for me, I think it misses the mark, because isn't that, school systems, they don't generate revenue, right? They take tax money. So for them if they want to continue doing that, then they need to produce working, productive citizens at the end of grade 12. So I don't know. I just kind of got lit up last year with dealing with stuff with my 9-year-old, our business.
Makes a difference when you got somebody in the middle of the fire, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It makes you pay a
Sure.
lot more attention on a very different level. You hear talking points nationally, locally, and then you go, oh, there's no way that's happening. There's no way that's happening. But when you're sitting down with your 9-year-old and you're having conversations that absolutely reflect some of those talking points, it hits home. And when it hits home, you kind of have to do one of two things. One, stand up and speak out, or two, not. And I chose to stand up and speak out. So here I am.
I tell you what you have to, and there's a fight for, like in North Carolina, everybody talks about, well, it's a red state. Well, it may be a red state, but there are certain areas in this place, whether it's Wake County, but you got, I always have to say this, caveat is this: when you have anything close to Durham, North Carolina, you're going to have what I call a bleed out, because Durham is, and I'm going to be honest, if there is a place in North Carolina being sick and being bloated and needs some attention, Durham is where would you start the enema? Because let me tell you something. If you want to keep North Carolina safe, you build a fence around Durham. You build a wall and you don't let nobody out. And you will see your crime rate just start dropping. Now, I'm not going to say it's going away, because on the national level, we've got a lot of incentive for crime to keep going up. But at least in this general area. So when that happens, I mean, it bleeds over to the school systems. These kids are taught that it's easier to go out and steal or take or do what they want to do. And even when they come back into school systems, there's no consequences for their action, even if this crime is committed in the schools, because more principals are worried about what their dropout rate looks like. They're concerned about their dropout rate. I'm going to call it for what it was. We had a superintendent in Durham, North Carolina. And that superintendent, I was in charge of the schools from a law enforcement liaison process. And I spoke to the sheriff and I said, well, what's the agenda? He said, get the drugs and guns out of schools. No problem. He said, Carbunch, make it happen. Well, I noticed that every time I went and said, hey, we're going to do a raid, or we're going to go out, not necessarily a raid, that's the wrong word. We're going to go out and do a search and look for things inside the schools. We would go down one hallway, and it was always the one the administrator picked. Law enforcement didn't pick it. And we weren't really coming up with anything. And then all of a sudden, when I said, no, we're going to go do a search, and we're going to do this hallway and this hallway while we do this hallway. Well, wait a minute, we can't do that because we didn't. I said, no, we're going down this hallway. And when we did that, we started finding loaded 9mm. We found drugs in the schools. We were arrests. We went into elementary schools, and we were pulling out knives, and we were pulling out anything that looks like a weapon. These kids were bringing in BB guns too. At one point, I think we did find a 22 in there. And then we started seeing the associations of how early the gangs were getting to these children. And nobody within the school system wanted to recognize this was an issue, to the point that the way they would continue and they would keep stats. So if we went into a school, and a lot of this is the way state does it too. It's not just Durham. You go into a school and you search, and in that search you find 3 firearms and you find drugs. So you recover 3 firearms and some drugs. That's 3 searches where you found the drugs, or 3 where you find the guns, whatever. Oh no, that was the law enforcement statistic. When it goes to the school, which is actually reported to the public, it's only 1 search, period, and weapon, period. Weapon recovered, drug recovered. So it looks like 1, 1, and 1. And reality is you got more coming out of it, and they wanted to squash that. I, on the other hand, was going to the press and saying we recovered this, and that. So for a solid 2 years, I was showing what we were producing from the school systems. Needless to say, that wasn't making them happy in the school system. So what do? I find out later that President Obama had been watching the superintendent there and appointed him later for a school safety position within the national government. So I now knew why the numbers were going to be skewed and why the politics from the school were coming at me, because they were running into the sheriff every chance they got. Get him out. He's making our schools look bad. He's making my school look bad. Principals were calling. They weren't saying, thank God the sheriff's office was there finding drugs and guns. They were worried about appearance. Why were they worried about appearance? Because their superintendent was worried about appearance. So the pressure comes from the top. And let me tell you, that happens in every school system across America. It's just not in the Durham public school system. When they were telling me it didn't happen, I pulled out a chart. I pulled out a chart of all the guns and weapons that were taken that year, and it was huge. And nobody really wanted to look at it. And when I was presenting that out there, it was like, oh, yeah, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, okay, thank you. On to the next topic.
Well,
so big issues.
Can I ask a question, Chad? And I find it terrifying, Rick, that you had a superintendent who had troubles in his schools, and the answer coming from the Obama administration was, okay, so that means we have to elevate him. He actually failed on his way up, and he was promoted to a higher responsibility for failing at the job he had. That's terrifying, and that's definitely America's school system under the democratic rule, the progressive ideology, in my point of view. But Chad, I wanted to ask one quick question of you.
Sure.
You said you were going through the remote learning with your 9-year-old. I don't know if that involved Common Core math, which I've looked at it before, and I'm a reasonably intelligent man. I've been a stockbroker, I've worked internationally, and I can't make heads or tails of it. I grew up with the math that got people to the moon. I don't know what Common Core is.
That's some pretty good math.
That's
a good math.
The math I learned is, what the ancient Greeks were able to tell the distance to the sun. It was good enough to get us to the moon. Now they've got Common Core, and I don't know what we could do with that. But I'm wondering, Rick, Chad, excuse me. I'm wondering, did you also see in that any elements of this idea that math is racist, or any of that math or science that they're somehow racist and that they're introducing new materials to fix that? Did you see that? Or is that something that you're aware of coming up in the school system?
Yeah, sure. No, it's a great question. And I think it's a question that's on the minds of millions of Americans. And even Wake County now, I think they just did a really thorough presentation about how to structure math to where statistics is about low income, murder, all of these social things. And so they want to introduce math and focus on those social things, as opposed to using math to teach someone how to balance a checkbook or how to do a profit and loss statement. They want to use social concepts and social examples to teach math. So that's there's CRT is a huge acronym that's being pushed across the country now. Yeah. Critical race theory. And the defense is, well, critical race theory is not being taught in school.
The applications are.
And they're right. There is no course being taught in school called critical race theory. Zero. However, now I'm the kind of candidate that when I hear a talking point or when I hear like a buzzword, I kind of dig into it before I start talking about it. And there's a concept, a book called Courageous Conversations. And this book is a guiding system for school board, district leaders, county leaders, state leaders. And it is all about using race to set policy and standards. And the thing is, and I did witness that straight up. My 9-year-old sitting here at the table, and now we're a mixed family. We're half. My wife is Puerto Rican. I am Anglo-Saxon. Boricua. Sí, señor. Absolutely. Yes. So my son is sitting here reading a story about Rosa Parks. and I'm doing my work. He's reading the story, and all of a sudden he looks up to me and he says, "Hey, Dad, what's racist?" Oh, okay, that's interesting. So we talked about it a little bit. He says, "Okay." I said, "Well, why are you curious?" He says, "Well," he goes, "Okay, now," and I'm like half white and half Puerto Rican, right? Yes, that's good. Yeah. He goes, "Okay, good. So then," I said, "Well, why is that important to you?" And he says, "Well, because only white people are racist." And
That's a lot.
and I paused for a second.
That's a lot.
And so then I had to go read what he was reading. Right? I was like, "Oh my
Right.
God, what is happening in a third grade reading program that my son has this thought?" Now, keep in mind, if he were in school, this thought would have been in his mind all day long. And with children, when they're in school, they come home, they don't tell you.
Mhm.
Naturally, they just don't tell you what's
Mhm.
going on. So that thought would have stayed in his mind. I don't even know how long that thought would have stayed. And that's the terrifying part for me, because I believe that, free thought is the greatest gift given to man from God. So
Mhm.
when that starts getting tarnished or manipulated, it really bothers me. So I read the story, and sure enough, it's a beautiful story about Rosa Parks. And all of a sudden, like the centerfold, you open it up, and the pages are all on fire. There are crosses in the background, KKK, scary heads, and the context is all about white people being racist.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, when you go ahead.
well, no, I was just saying, so I have seen that in its real form in the book Courageous Conversations. If you should check it out and look at it. It is a guide to teach county leaders, district leaders, how to write policies under the context and under the assumption that to be racist, you must be a member of the dominant race and in a sustained position of power. So in America, the definition of racism now absolutely
Our
is
privilege.
you can only be racist if you're white. But I guess if you go to Africa, it's a different racism. If you
No,
go
I
to
got to say this here.
a
Let,
different
let me
race,
say this here because now when you said that, it's interesting. Now I'm going to hit you with something that was very interesting about that. And the people who have come up with this theory are Caucasian.
that's right.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to make sure.
Most of
This is some of the insanity of all this is stuff that gets me. When you looked at the BLM riots, I'm gonna hit this, but look at the BLM riots. Did you notice that most of those kids did not have a dark hue?
Mhm.
Most of those kids, they look like they may have just got on some kind of hoodie or something and came off of their college campus and then burned something up and then went back on campus to show how great they were. So like from the 70s kids, it's just this insanity. But to stay on topic, to get back on topic, when you were talking about that math, I think it's a very interesting thing. When you spoke about the math, does anybody remember The Incredibles?
Oh
And
yeah.
then and then you have Mr. Incredible sitting there trying to teach Dash, his son, math. And he said, math is math. Why did they change math? The old way worked. Why did they do it? But I will
Yeah.
say here, when I look at a lot of stuff that's happened to undermine us with education, it seems like it's to disconnect wedge between the kids and their authority figure and their parents. It's really to put a division, because if the parents get to the point where they cannot teach the educational material that their kids are learning, which is what it is, because they actually have a weird theory type of teaching that they have now. And I learned a lot of theory. I know math theory. I can actually prove in about 40 pages that the number one exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane. You can't just accept it, but I could actually prove it. But you cannot tell me how it makes sense to try and teach a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old math theory.
Yep.
The only thing that makes sense to me is trying to wedge away authority figure in the parental guidance. It makes no sense. I had one more that I wanted to hit with that one, was just for a thought. When you look and see a lot of the problem that the school systems are having right now, though, our book manufacturers are one of the biggest issues for it. And this falls back even with the math, even when you were talking about the CRT and the SEL type stuff, the social emotional learning and critical race theory being taught. If you look, a number of our big book manufacturers have actually sold out to the woke agenda. If you go to their websites, I found out this as I've run for this position, they sold out. So right now we have to now create laws in our states. Florida has one. It says in real bright, bold words, you will not have CRT, critical race theory, or social emotional learning theory or strategies implemented or taught in any of our learning materials. That's why we had 40 some odd % of our math books. It's in all the books, but our math books had to be rejected because even without soliciting it, it's in the books.
Yeah.
That's just a thought to kind of throw back at you guys.
I got a question for you here, Chad, and this is going to be, it just struck me, and I think this is huge. First, let me ask, is your opponent, I don't know how they do the school boards in your area. I don't know if it's open seats and you fill the seats or if you have a direct opponent. Is the person you're going against an incumbent? Were they there last year?
No, I do not have an incumbent.
Okay.
There are 4 of us now. There were 5. 1 just dropped out. And really,
That's
there are 3 Democrats and 1 Chad. That's really ultimately what is happening. There's the handpicked Democrat. There's the school teacher, which I actually like her better than the other 2, and then there's the college professor. So there's this blend, and then you have me, the high school educated landlord business owner, doing all right for myself. I represent the majority of Americans in the fact that I had to cut my teeth and I had to make my way without a college education and without any kind of privilege. So that is the majority of America, whether the elites like it or not. That is the majority of America.
About 85%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I asked that for a specific reason because I think this is a great question to bring up for the election for every parent out there. You are talking about a book, but you're talking about a lesson and a book that your 9-year-old came to you, that book, that lesson just told your son you are evil. That book, that lesson just told him you are racist by definition because of the color of your skin by birth. And that half of his family is somehow intrinsically and absolutely racist and evil because of the color of their skin. That is a terrifying thing to teach a child. And who are they putting in as the authority in your families if they're saying, well, your dad is now an evil guy, he's a racist, you should listen to who instead? And I would love to hear all the people who were responsible for introducing that book into the school board, that introduced that book, that introduced that idea that these families are now intrinsically absolutely racist and evil, and your own kids are supposed to not feel good about you. I would love to hear their answer about why they teach that.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question, Chad. So I pulled up Sam Hershey's website.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise on that note. And this is going to be a real deal show because I want to look. You're here and you're telling us all the, because you're ready to step up. You know who you are. You can stand for what you are. You'll put it out there and you're really talking about it. So I'm looking at his website and it says, my promise to you when I serve on the Wake County School Board. I will be a tireless supporter and a defender of our great public schools while working hard to address challenges we face. I will advocate the needs of our students, staff, families. I will listen to and communicate with our parents and community partners. I will serve with integrity and transparency. Is he a former? Is he an incumbent, or is he now just running? Who is he?
No, he ran for our city council 2 years ago and did not make it. So he is what I like to refer to. He's the recycled politician, and the Democratic Party obviously didn't feel like he should try to go for anything higher again. So I think they just threw him a bone and said, "Hey, listen, we'll back you. Why don't you do school board and let's let the big leaguers run for the big league offices."
Right. So yeah, because I'm looking at said he's talking about the endorsements. Of course, I'm proud to announce that these endorsements. He's got school board members, which that
Yes.
kind of concerns me.
Yeah.
I just don't. But I'm not looking at any major endorsements right now, other than kind of typical standard the Democratic Party. And some
The
of the
NCAE, that beautiful organization.
yeah, the caucus and all the standard, all the standard Democratic stuff. I always love when the left says, and they're really playing it up now in the national politics, the local is. Well, I've been in this and I've been doing this, and it's time to quit being straight party affiliations, and we need to step out. But when you go back and ask them about it, they can't tell you what they've done one time. That was a group effort. So I've been working on this process. So I've gotten a lot of calls from a law enforcement standpoint, from senators, congressmen, and I know a lot of them. I knew them before the politics. I know them after the politics. Like I said, as long as I've been in law enforcement, I can guarantee you I pretty much have talked to any of them, most of them. So I know where they stand on issues over a lifetime. And some of them are lifetime politicians, as we know. So having said all that, my challenge to each one of them is, even with the defund the police movement, the first thing I ask them when they call it, ask for support. I ask them. I don't ask them, are you a Democrat? I don't ask them if you're a Republican. I ask them, can you tell me anywhere in the last 4 years, anywhere since 2016 even, can you tell me where you stood up for law enforcement and denounced the anger toward law enforcement? And they were like, well, yeah, you can call and ask. I said, no. Can you show me publicly? Can you send me something where you wrote an article, where you stood up with the police chief, or you stood up and said, this is wrong? I said, send that to me. Oh yeah, I got it. And I'm telling you, I probably spoke to 20 statewide politicians. Do you know, shock face again, I've not seen one thing come across that indicates that they did exactly that, because now they want to play that they support law enforcement. They want to try to turn the switch, and lo and behold, they can't prove anything because they have nothing. They can't show anything. And so when it comes to the public schools and the school systems, law enforcement is a big part of the school system, because when something goes south, what do they want? They want law enforcement. But when you say defend the police, defund the police, you're not defending the children. You're not defending the schools. You're not defending the teachers, the staff. Who are you defending when you want to defund? And don't use the word redirect, because that means the same thing, Mr. President. We're going to redirect funds. That means I'm going to take it from law enforcement. So don't tell me you're going to do anything other than, we're going to redirect our funding. That's like when and I know this to be a fact, superintendents redirect funding all the time for projects that they were supposed to be working on, end up in the administrative side of everything, toward a new assistant, a new program. But when it gets down to that, program is really coordinated to help the superintendent more than it helps the schools, because the money that you redirect from the classroom is taking from the children. So, it just amazes me how they can justify some of the things, just like the folks on the left want to get out there and talk about defund the police. Well, when anybody that's superintendent takes money from a certain program to start another program and takes it out of the classroom, he's defunding the children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem, because people don't recognize that. Superintendent is like, better than superintendent is like the god of in the schools. He's like the high sheriff in the schools. He is the ultimate supreme leader, and nobody's going to challenge him. And that is the way that's the way North Carolina schools work.
Yep. Well, I will. I can share a story with you, Rick, to kind of to share my view of law enforcement. My 9-year-old last year, we tried to get him a medical exemption, a modified medical exemption, so he wouldn't have to wear a mask in school. The principal played dumb, pretending like he didn't know how to get one or who granted them or whatever. You know, fast forward now, I've shortened my learning curve and I'm much smarter than what I was a year ago. But at the time, I didn't know anything. So finally, our school board member, Jim Martin, live in a board meeting says COVID's not deadly to children. And I said, okay, well, then that's it for me. I'm done for sure. I'm done. So I went to the school and said, hey, listen, I need to know what the policy is, what's happening, what are you actually doing other than saying mask up, shut up? I need to know, are you paying attention to our kids or are you just masking them? And they had no clear answers. So finally I went one day and I said, you know what? That's it. I'm done. I'm not masking my child anymore. Either you provide to me the data that I need or I'm done. So principal, he and I, we, get into a little heated discussion. The next day I go back, I'm recording the conversation because that's the thing you do now in 2020 and beyond. You record everything.
Oh, yeah.
And they wouldn't let my kid in. So I called our local law enforcement to try to get them to advocate and help me out. And they're like, well, it's the school rules, blah, blah, blah. I caught a bad cop on a bad day with a bad attitude. So they get really upset with me. My child is freaking out. So you know what I did, Rick? I took my child to the police department. We knocked on the door, and one of the nicest sergeants came outside, met with us. I told him what just happened. And then like 2 or 3 more sergeants came out. They brought my son this big old stuffed bear. And I, in my mind, the school system, they took advantage of law enforcement to enforce a policy as opposed to enforcing law. And it bothered me. And I grew up in a very poor neighborhood where we were all afraid of the police. No one even looked at them. And I made a conscious decision that I was not going to let my child's experience with the police department be exactly that, where he felt like he had to be afraid of them. So we went to the Raleigh PD office and gave him pencils, spoke to him, gave him a little badge, sticker. And he had like the time of his life understanding what law enforcement actually means.
Right.
I mean, they even wrote an article and featured my son, featured me, and put it out for like Good News Thursdays or something. It was beautiful. So for me, I think it's important that when our systems abuse access to law enforcement, we can't hold resent against those officers because they're trying to feed their family just like I'm trying to feed mine. So
they're in a bad position too because they can't really enforce administrative rules unless somebody's being trespassed for an issue. Then it becomes more of a criminal type of thing. So talking about law enforcement, how do you feel about SROs and then police officers with firearms in the schools?
I think the most efficient SRO. I think we have there are 2 conversations that happen with SROs at the same time. There's the community aspect where they're involved in schools, teaching, working with kids, mentoring kids, and then there is the I am here to protect kids conversation.
Right.
So like in Wake County, we have SROs, all of our high schools, but there's still not a really well-defined SRO program, right? Like it's all, hush, hush, top secret because, we can reveal our strategies to attack countries, but we cannot talk about our strategies to defend schools. So maybe that makes sense to someone, but I think it makes it really hard to hold accountability.
That's called the blue wave. See, that's the blue wave. That's what you got in the blue wave. Mm-hmm. So so what I think you missed what I was talking about earlier, and earlier about some of the situations in schools involving SROs and stuff. It's a highly political situation because recently ended up with a a sheriff who actually didn't know what his left hand to his right hand was doing, and couldn't even spell the word sheriff if he had to on a great day. And he got it voted out, thank goodness. So one way or the other, we're going to have a new sheriff.
That's right.
We do have a Republican running against a Democrat. And, it's like anything else. So we have two different choices now. And the question is where do you line up and how you run it? I think the problem that we have in all this is we have too many people too worried about the political end of things, and they try to balance a balance beam of BS. And that beam is there. Go ahead, Michael.
I don't have a lot of time, but I want to ask you about this, Chad, because we're talking about the police, we're talking about schools, and I think this is a real important question, not only because it's timely, but it's very critical. We have two schools of thought that are out there. We've seen what happens with the Uvalde school system and that school of thought, which is sit back, no one's armed. Will send in police after the incident has already started and make the best of it. And the only other answer is, and no one in the universe can own a firearm, which is not realistic. Okay. And then there's, I don't know if you've read this, the Parkland, Florida school system, the school district, took a year and did a full report about the shooting that happened in Parkland. And they came up with guidelines on exactly how to secure the schools and protect the children, which not only meant hardening the school, making sure doors are locked and that no one's propping them open, but also included not just having SROs, which are basically armed police officers in schools, but having armed police officers in the schools. And depending on how big the school is, that would determine how many armed officers would be in the schools, with potentially, if teachers wanted to, the opportunity for one or two teachers to be armed within the school itself, obviously with training individuals who have the credentials for that. So those are the two schools of thought. And realistically, it is that simple. We either have armed officers and or teachers in schools, or we have Uvalde. Let me ask you, which one do you see, or is there a third option that I'm not aware of?
Well, I think Uvalde, the biggest, I mean, pick a target for the Uvalde conversation, you'll land on some valid argument. The school systems do not need to be directing law enforcement armed individuals, period. I don't think that that's what it needs to be. I think law enforcement, like sworn officers, are the most effective because they have the most opportunity. Uvalde, same thing. It was a school police officer, suspicious vehicle, suspicious person walking down the other side of the street. Well, that school officer can't do anything about that. They have to wait until the threat has arrived before they can take action. So for me, you have to have that official law enforcement officer if you really want to make sure that the perimeter of schools are kept safe and they're protected, because that is where most of the threats come from. They come from the exterior and then they gain access to the interior. I think very practical things like kick locks on doors, stuff like that, that makes a lot of sense. It's at least a peacemaker for both schools of thought. And then on the interior of the schools, I think each school needs to have some type of autonomy of like, hey, we need this because this is what we're going through. And then the school system should try to do their best to support it. But I think, if you look at North Carolina, our Department of Justice, they go through 400 hours of training, 120 are mandatory, and then 280 are electives. And depending on the officer's personality or what they're into or what they like, then they choose their electives. So I think we could probably carve out a little bit more mandatory and make sure that those officers are really dialed in and they're always focused on what they're there to do, which is to protect children. If it's the community police, do more of a DARE program, gang deterrent, those kinds of things. I think those are brilliant. And I think it'll also prevent the SROs from being bored to pieces, just sitting in libraries, hanging out. They have to have a role, and they have to be a role model.
So Chad, you said that there were electives. Now, in law enforcement, for me, from perspective, I was in charge of training for the Durham County Sheriff's Office. We didn't have that system. I don't know where that system's coming from. When we went through our initial training for rookie school, this was back in, shoot, I went back way back in whatever year it was, back in '84. I believe it was '84. I really didn't want to give up the year, but I did anyway. What the heck? I'm just kidding. '84, we did, I believe it was 484 hours. And then we come back and we do in-service training. And what we had to do was the in-service training wasn't decided by the officer. It was decided by the training and standards. So when training and standards makes the decision, that's what law enforcement has to go by to keep their certifications. Now, having said that, we would always get every year on training standards, we would get the active shooter training, things of that. But to what you're saying is there was really no required school resource officer training set for it. And I think this may take it back away, but when we got away from community policing in our communities, we also got away from community policing in our schools. And therein started our problem because they thought everything could be trained and set for training and standards, when in reality, training and standards was checking off the boxes. And we got to get away from checking off the boxes. Active shooter drill training and all this stuff that I went through, we had X amount of hours. We had to qualify for that. Officers would come in and do it. And believe it or not, they like that kind of stuff, because they're really doing it. But the only time you get an SRO training or a DARE training is when they sent you to the specialty school. And then you would go back and research every now and then. But there wasn't a lot of focus other than on the job training when you got there. So it was like a recipe that you had, but if you didn't practice it, you didn't. They have a standard in which they used, and that was about it. So
it's like all skills, right? If you don't practice them, they fade away.
That's right. And practice makes perfect. And I agree. I think we need more focuses on how we deal with the schools to prevent that. And it gets back to everything from, everybody has to, what the old thing, see something, say something. Yeah, I get all that. That's a great cliche. But when you walk by a door, the average person's not looking who's standing on the other side. But when you can walk by a door, you can look and make sure it's locked. And then they do not designate cameras in most schools for one person to sit at a camera and be dedicated to look at cameras all day, because that is just in the office used after the event. They're not going to pay somebody to sit there and watch a camera, when in reality, if they did and they put up what I call the big camera wall, and you had somebody watching that camera, you'd be surprised at what one person can sit there and watch and catch before they even get to the school door. Right. That's where they got to use. They got to start using some technology and put money into security and to that law enforcement piece, and break away from all these frills, spills, beautiful programs to try and make the superintendent look good. I'm just keeping it real. These guys out there want to do a great job, but you got to give them the training, and you got to give them the current updated equipment and technology to do it. You can't teach them to do certain things and not give them the best equipment to do it, because you know what? Why not spend the best to get the best to protect America's children? That's just common sense. And if you don't want to do that, then you don't need to be sitting in a position of power. You need to step down and bow out gracefully. But you know what? That blue wave, they got one thing in mind, and that's win at all costs. The end. When I get there, I will talk about it. So
I do have to take off. I have a hard limit because I have to do something. But I did want to say, Chad, I find it impressive and important that you've actually considered this, that you have an answer to the question, because you'd be amazed how many times I've talked to people running for every kind of office, from literally, I've talked to everyone from school boards to literally national vice presidential figures. And you'd be amazed how many times I ask a question. They go, I haven't even considered that. So I find it important, and I think it's vital. And I thank you for having taken the time to take it serious, to have answers to some of the things I've asked about. I hope people in your community are asking you questions, talking about it. And if they are, I think And even if you don't, I think if they hear you at all, they are going to say, you deserve to be elected. I hope that's what's going to happen. I look forward to following this race and seeing you elected there. Pastor, I thank you for your being here with me. And most of all, Rick, I thank you
No
for giving
problem.
me the opportunity to talk to you and all your audience about these very important issues.
Hey, well, thank you for being on the show. And, we've talked before, and I tell you what, you guys are a stand-up act. And, it was just something I've always wanted to do. I think the local level is where we got to start it. People talk about the national, but you got to knock their legs out at the local level if you want to get their attention. You got to break that. You got to break up that poor foundation, and you got to set some new ground concrete and rekindle the fire and get it to the top. So thanks, Michael, for stopping by. Thank you very much. And we'll do this again real soon. Pastor, we'll turn it over to you real quick.
Yeah, I'm about to have to leave too.
That's
A couple of words, Chad. You might want to check out Sheriff Grady Judd from Florida. That's Polk County. That's where I was born and raised. But Sheriff Grady Judd, that program that you're talking about, Sheriff Grady Judd. That whole program that Florida ended up implementing is the talk of the nation that you're mentioning right now was actually based off of his program from my home county. And it is called the Guardian program. And that whole principle around that is from one of the sheriffs in our state that has one of the best records of law enforcement, bar none, in the nation. A lot of people model their programs after things that he's implemented. When you look at that Guardian program, he actually goes through the rationale behind why you teach what you teach, why you have the security at the schools, and even down to the concept of who might, beyond the officers, hold roles of helping to protect those campuses, and what are the criteria that will be placed upon those people. It's a very good listen and read to go through that. It was very helpful for me. I know myself just listening to him go through that process, because I'm not sure if you ever saw there's a statistic that was produced out of the state of Florida, but it was actually, I think, a national one, and it did over 40 some cases of school violence where people came in and did shootings and what have you. And it actually, did you ever see the one where it actually talked about the response time?
No.
Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, I feel the response times are not.
Okay, this is what it is. Awesome. This is where the whole basis for whether or not to have more people able to defend the kids on campus versus, the other. And what happened was this here. Most of the damage is done within 0 to 5 minutes of it starting. And that can mean a student who got on campus and it doesn't matter if they were locked out or not. Or that could be somebody who was trying to get into campus. But either way it goes, 0 to 5 minutes. The officers, as for, I guess that was 41 of those incidents, 40 or 41, something like that, they didn't arrive until the 5-minute mark, which means all of the death and the injury and the mayhem occurred. And I'm not talking about like the one that everybody's been talking about, Valdi and all this stuff. I'm talking about where you actually had people that they got there and they were trying to do their jobs. The only 1 or 2 times that the officers actually handled what was going on and stopped it before it caused all of the damage was when by accident officers were on campus for something else. The incident started to go down and then they reacted to it and stopped it. So what happens is that whole thing. Now I noticed a lot of scenarios about all the other details about whether it's a lock gun or a lock this or lock that for whatever, but those things could be worked out. But the rationale behind the Guardian program or these SRO programs or increasing them, it really is a wonderful thing. I'm glad for what you said. It'll be very helpful because that's one of the ones that I know they'll ask you heavy on. I wish I could stay and hear you to answer the one on who's supporting you, because having run, You really need to cover that one, my friend Chad. I definitely would love for you to cover. Who's supporting you? Are the Republicans supporting you? Are you getting that good conservative support? Because that's extraordinarily important. And what day is your race?
November 8th, Tuesday.
Okay. So it is on the same. Ours was
Oh, yeah.
August and November. Okay. Then so right now, are you in a runoff or are you actually in the race where all of you are running against each other?
Everybody's running.
Okay, that's different than Florida, but well, I do pray that you do well, my friend. I pray that they give you all of the opportunities possible in that large area of yours to
It's
get
huge.
in front of the people.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And yes, I'm getting some Republican love. You know, I'm the county endorsed candidate by the Republican Party,
Okay.
which is, you know, I had to, you know, separate my mind a little bit because I'm not a big state politician person, or, you know, to me, those things kind of give me headaches. But on the local level, you know, that conservative Republican mindset at this point in time in our lives together is about preservation. It is truly about preservation. Like it is mandatory for us right now. We have an obligation to preserve whatever cherished thing there is for our society and our future. We have to now get in the game, get out of our comfort zone of, you know, heads down, moving forward, working hard, providing for my family. I realize that now I have to do the same for other families, because you know that is what it takes. There's the quiet conservative now is it's hurting America. And so you know, it's time to have conservative advocates doing the conservative work. And that's just preserving, just keeping public school open to our public, every child, every race, every creed, every color. It is the melting pot of our nation, and it has to be cherished, respected, and protected.
Perfect, my brother. You have a very good night now.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.
Hey, Pastor, thank you for coming in. And what Chad, I believe, is what we call the new Republican.
Amen to that.
Absolutely. So, yeah, well, thank you for coming in. And we're going to do this again. I'd love to have you back on the show so we can have more conversations with Chad, some other school board members. And
no problem. No problem. And I can always ask more specific questions that'll help you to just have a lot of good sound bites. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We got a few. That's for sure. Thank you.
Oh, great. Right. Okay, good. That's cool. Okay.
All right.
Pastor, thank you so much. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Well, Rick, this is cool.
Well, Chad now it's his one-on-one, so it makes it, you know, what are things that we try to do on a show, as you see how it kind of just flows. People come and they go as they want. I do a 2-hour window of opportunity. So in the real world, not in that grandeur world of politics where they set up in the big towers and stuff where they do what they do. In the real world is we can't, our time frames, if you have children, you got things you got to do, or things that you got to stop off at the store before you get in. The window of opportunity is from 7 to 9. That way I don't put the time of, well, 7 this, 7 that. I don't run a show that structured because of we're everyday Americans. I mean, it's your America. That's what I tell everybody. It's your America, you know. And so we said, where'd you come up with that way? I said, well, it's not always about me. It's about you. It's about them. It's about us. And when you talk to somebody, it's your America. You know, now what you see America as is still your America. But what I see America as to the person is my America. So I'm red, white, and blue. I'm conservative. Everybody knows that. And I tell people, well, if you know about me, just all you got to do is Google. And it'll tell you everything you don't know about me. Some of it, a lot of it's not quite accurate. But when you're in law enforcement, you're involved in politics, that story grows. It gets legs. So,
yeah, right. Sure.
And some of it is accurate. So I own it and stand proud and don't deny it. And I've gone toe to toe and eye to eye with the left and didn't back down. I had some really hard fought races and really scored some really, I call them victories, because up until then, nobody ever put a dent in the Durham. Nobody put a dent in a district that had always been going so solid with the blue. But you know what? What I found was if you have time That is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But when you don't have the money the other candidates do, that replaces some of that time because they can venture out and do. But areas that you can work in, it's like for me, somebody said, well, why do you work in this area so hard? Why you can't win that area? Those areas always go blue. Well, guess what? Out of those areas that they told me that were going to go blue, there was total like 21 areas that was so solid blue, but they're huge and they're inner city, they're this, they're that. And 6 of those areas I turned red. But did it win? No. But let me tell you something. They knew we were there, and they know that we cared about our children, and we knew and we cared about mental health. I ran as a Republican. I talked about mental health. I talked about children in the school. So I think sometimes when people try to say, well, you can't talk about that because that's not a Republican issue. That's what I call the new Republican, because Republicans do talk about other issues other than these standard issues. There are issues out there. It's everyday issues. They're bread and butter issues. They're sitting at the table issues where you're talking to your family about things they feel during the day. And I think it's great, especially at a school board level. People don't understand how significant a school board position really is, because what do? They deal with your children. And what is the most precious thing that we have as a family? And that's our children. I commend you for running for the school board, because people don't realize the effort and the time and the reward if you win is so much great, because you have a say-so in there. As long as you get that other team built up. And
funny.
even it's amazing, Go ahead.
Well, I have these conversations with people all the time, like, oh, why are you doing this? I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm not passionate about winning the seat. I'm passionate about the work that comes on the other side of it. Like,
Right.
That's what I'm passionate about. Like, I'm like that guy on the side. Like, I'm the one that, send me in, coach, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's time. It is time to take a chance. It's time to put something different on our school board. It is time to send me in so I can go to work. That's it. So it's crazy. A lot of people, they want to win. It's about winning. I'm like, okay, well, that's wonderful. That's great. But I have been educating myself, Rick, for the last year strong. I bet I have shortened my learning curve leaps and bounds above even the Democrat who's running. I'm willing to bet that I'm ahead of him as far as understanding how to navigate policy, get policy across the board, and how to actually advocate for positive change for students. I mean, I'm excited about the work.
Well, when you're going out and you're talking to the different people and you're meeting and you're communicating with them, what's been the reception as far as the position that you're taking on some of these issues?
Well, the hot topic issues are, everyone's kind of like, we all know kind of how we feel about it, but no one really wants to talk about it. Right? I had a lovely conversation with I'm certain a strong Democrat on her front porch. And she's like, okay, well, let's talk about the books and the librarians and the this. And I said, well, I mean, parents on both sides across the entire, swatch of politics and culture want age-appropriate material for their children.
Right.
They're not worried about free speech. They just want age-appropriate, right? They're saying, hey, if the book is depicting sexual acts, can we put it on the top shelf so that my 5-year-old can't just easily get to it? And that's it. So there is some meeting in the middle that can be done. Parents that have different religious views. It's not about silencing someone else's voice. It is about learning how to live with other voices.
It's about protecting your children, more importantly.
That's right.
I tell you, and the thing is I've looked at some of the books, and I thought, oh my God, there's certain books that shouldn't even be on the shelf.
Yeah.
I mean, they're as far as I'm concerned, what I saw was pornography. I don't care.
Well, they're all illustrations. That's right. They're all illustrations.
God, the illustrations on there, and then it's just unbelievable what they think is okay to be in a school library.
Well, I think they just think, they think Title IX So they think, well, there's some child somewhere in the universe at the age of 5 years old that really needs this material in their life. So therefore, we have to make it accessible to all children.
To me, it's like I said to one of the candidates in Durham School Board, who was running a while back. It's almost like it's a recruiting tool for certain groups to say, hey, we need to tell children about this because they might be this way and they don't need to suffer. Well, I think if you're showing it to, it almost becomes a banner for recruitment more than it becomes an issue. I've never seen a 5 or 6 year old child come up and say, I'm struggling on who I am. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen because sometimes, and the reality is, and let's keep it real. The reality is that sometimes you look at a child and you think something's crossed there, the chromosomes or something may be crossed, and you may not say it, but in your mind, everybody goes, yeah, maybe. But you don't go out there and say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this.
Yeah.
You wait for the child to grow. You may think so. You may suspect that. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's the reality of what the child may be going through. But when that child starts having questions, then you give him, you talk to that child. As a mother and a parent, it's your responsibility. It's not the school's.
Well, think of it, worse, even like to add a layer, right? Let's say there's a child in a classroom that's having some type of journey. And then that teacher decides, you know what, I'm going to help this kid through their journey. Well, they create this almost like this surrogate relationship with that child, right? So that child has this relationship, this dependency, this safe space, all of that stuff. Well, at some point, that teacher exits that kid's life.
Right.
And now there is no one. So now you have a child that is going to instantly fall into the deepest depression they have ever felt in their life. Right. Hopefully they make it out of it. They've kept this thing away from their parents. They've kept it away from their friends. And now that teacher is no longer in their life. They deal with abandonment issues. They deal with loneliness. And what do you think is the most likely outcome for that young person who has to struggle with that? They're not with us anymore.
Right.
That's devastating. And it's devastating. So this idea that you cannot have a partnership with parents is a rotting concept. It is a rotting narrative. I've heard the argument, well, teachers spend more time with children. Do they? When the kid is suffering with their math or English, who's their first tutor, Rick?
Right,
Who is the child's first tutor?
It goes right to the parent. It goes right to the parent. Because
who's waking up with that child at midnight with nightmares? Is it anyone other than a parent? No.
Yeah, I don't know of any student or child that walks into a teacher's bedroom in the middle of the night from another house and says, I've had a bad dream.
You got that right. They don't even call for the teacher. I can promise you that.
That's right. And that's the thing is, I think when you look at the children, and let's face it, I mean, children come from all walks of life, the different nationalities.
That's right.
And now you look at, talk about the things you're going in the Wake County schools. Look at the overflow of the Hispanic children that are coming in now.
Yeah.
That are really pouring into school because they're going to get this education because they're entitled to the education. Now, how people feel about the illegals and all that, that's a whole different topic. But when it comes to the children, whether you like them being there or not, the fact is they're there. They're putting them into schools. They're coming to schools. And that's a big expense, number one. But again, is the child at fault at 6 or 7 years old because they ended up there? Because I can guarantee you, no child ever said, hey, I think I'm leaving my country. Just don't happen that way.
Yeah.
So that's that. How would you deal with your thought processes? How do we deal with the overpopulation of the children that may not even be documented here? How do we deal with that?
Well, so there are two things. One, I have to firm up what I'm about to say, but I believe it to be true. If the child cannot speak English, they are not allowed to attend school. So you have these people that are never in the system, and they very seldomly become productive into the system. So there's a strange argument that says, well, we need this workforce, we need this labor force, we need whatever. Well, I can tell
Right.
you, we know lots of Hispanic families, and we hear lots of Latino moms and Latino dads
Mhm.
talking at soccer games, at the
Yep.
park. And let me tell you something, Rick. Those families are on their kids about getting good grades,
Yep.
about focusing, studying, doing all those things. And you know, they tell them, no, you will go get an education so you don't have to lay concrete.
Oh, absolutely. You know,
They
and I'm gonna.
recognize the American dream, right? They recognize it and they chase it. And their culture is loving, it's supportive. You know, there's something we
Absolutely.
can learn from a minority culture, and
Right.
all minorities. You know, not just Hispanic, but every single minority group. There tends to be a really strong community
Mhm.
because that is what they have to depend on, and it's
Well, and
beautiful.
you're right. In the Hispanic community, people don't realize I worked with the Hispanic community in the sheriff's office many,
Yeah.
many years, and they are a solid family. They are a
Yes.
very Christian based, Catholic based, religious based family that believes in the family values, doing things the right way. The stereotype of there's some stereotypes out there, but what I found out throughout the process is they value their children more than they value anything else.
Oh
First
yeah.
and foremost, and so when you see this, and I've talked to so many families that they're like, wait a minute, we came in and we had to do X, Y, and Z to get to this point. We had to get this point. We had to do this, and now you're actually hearing these folks. I went to a business the other day to get my car worked on, and we were there just talking, and he said, sir, he said, appreciate you coming in here. And I said, yeah, I don't mind. And then I told him what I did for a living and stuff, and told him about and he was very, wow, wow. And then I started hearing his expression of politics. And people don't realize how conservative
Yeah.
the Hispanic population really is. If they have a business, their families are in school, they're thriving and they're doing great things. They're 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 the extreme conservative, and they'll tell you real fast. And what they say is, and I'm not stereotyping, everyone that I talk to that's been strong conservative with the family values and the schools, and they want
Yeah.
for their children, but they also want everything to be as equal the way they had to go through the process. Not just like you
Yes,
said,
sir.
show up and you can't even speak this language, and then they pass you through because you may have this person, that person, oh, well, they meet the requirements. They attended the class. Oh, they satisfactorily completed the class. Let's just shoot them on up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we tried that before, and that didn't work in America when we were just passing kids right up through. And sometimes your school systems are still doing it. Now with COVID, I think that's going on a lot now because it's easier to pass them through, and they end up when they graduate in the 12th, they're probably talking about 11th, 10th, or 11th grade education, if that. Yeah.
Well, you know, this blows my. So I'll one of the things I'm like really passionate about, right? Being a high school educated business owner, and my wife and I, we own real property. I have a
Right.
real estate license.
Mhm.
I've opened a few different businesses. I opened a travel agency on a train ride from Washington D.C. to Raleigh on one trip. I just thought, I wonder if I could own a travel agency. And then by the time I arrived in Raleigh, I was ready to be open for business. So
So yeah.
these are things that I'm passionate about it because on the vocation side of it, every time I hear anyone, it's like, oh, well, here's this low performing school area, so we need to teach them all how to be plumbers. Well, I'm sorry. Do you know how many millionaire plumbers I know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
tough.
seriously. Do you know how
Yeah.
many millionaire electricians I know? These people exist. This
Yep.
is a
Oh,
real
look,
thing.
hey, let me tell you something. It's a tough business to get that. It's a tough business. What I said, it's
But
tough,
it's like everything
but they
else. It's
get
a
there.
grind. That's right. It's a grind. And when they get there, they love life, Rick. They
Oh,
love life.
yeah. Well,
You know, and-
well, electrician now in so many areas, electricians are making $100 an hour. They're making,
yes,
but
sir.
when you open up your own business, your value is based on your quality and your base.
That's right. It's
And so
accountability.
it's right. And if people are willing to pay you X, Y, Z, that's called capitalism. That's called, hey, then guess what? You make that much money and you pay those taxes. Then if they direct that money to the school system where they should,
That's right.
guess what? Now you get
Everybody
your better,
wins.
bigger schools. Everybody wins.
That's right.
It's a tax base. People don't always look at, they run too busy trying to run folks off of an area. It's back in the day, and in comparison to, oh, well, so and so moved in, everybody starts moving out.
Yep.
It used to be back in the day in the 60s, 70s, when they go, oh, here comes white flight. They're going to be out because somebody moves in, or the schools and things like that. Well, you can't really do that in America today in so many of the areas because the way the school system is set up. So whatever flight you take, you're not going to run away from being that in your mind. What is your perfect community? So we as parents, or we as anybody that's a politician or anybody that's a board member, have to come up with some kind of reasonable plan to educate our children.
Yep.
It's where everybody benefits all, and not just standard of saying, okay, law says this, and that. And then what happens is it's no longer a non-biased situation. It becomes a fill in the block, fairly that way. I don't care who you are. It was only says, okay, you're getting it free. On the other side, privilege says, oh, okay, you're getting it free. So when you look at it, it's the entitlement versus privilege. Kind of the same thing when you talk about it, but the entitlement comes from you're entitled to it, i.e., by the letter of the law, or you're entitled to it based on where you live, based on your ethnicity, or whatever it is, or based on, it doesn't matter. There's so many things that can say you're entitled to this, you're entitled to this right or this protection. But when you look at it, we don't have entitlement for children. We have entitlement for teachers' school unions. We have a lot of that, or not to the child. I always said that children, if they had as much protection in place to protect them as the school system has in place to protect them, we'd be the strongest, most educated society in this world. So that's my thoughts, but yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. I'm gonna double back on that whole growth access for our kids. September 28th, and I'll send you the thing, and I hope you'll share it with your listeners and post it everywhere. But we're going to be at the City Club in downtown Raleigh, and we have a panel, and we're discussing how to modernize vocational skills and access for Wake County Public School students. Mm-hmm. That's our whole mission in life. So on this panel, I'll be hosting. We have a guy who is doing Department of Defense high-end computer coding right now. Didn't make it through college. Actually became a plumber. Great story. Great story. Fell out of love with plumbing, got into iOS, and is now actually creating an educational platform for people who want to gain that access without having to go to a $60,000 a year college to get a job that on the other side of it might bring them $75,000, $80,000 much earlier in life.
Oh, yeah.
Have another guy who owns a esports video game company in Cary. He's going to be on the panel. And then I have another guy who owns a marketing company and does game development. And then I have another a brilliant lady who's going to be on the panel. I can't name the company she works for yet. We're getting permission now, but she'll be there. And her company utilizes nothing but 3D imaging, 3D scanning, and 3D printing.
Right.
So that's our panel, and we're going to present. Here is where we want to go, so that we can re-envision vocation, modernize it, so that our youth will be excited about it. It's
Right.
not just, oh, you're not the brightest in, reading, so you need to go do that. No, 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 no,
Right.
no, no.
Right.
This is an opportunity for you to make yourself into who you want to be, despite what the system says about you. That's what I stand for, and that's the track. I want our kids to have more empowerment on the back end of that grade 12,
Mhm.
and that'll, I am convinced it'll fix so many things in our society, our country, our politics, all of it.
And I think as long as we can put the right people in the right place,
Yes, sir.
as long as we can do that. If not, then what happens is you're just a bad old capitalist trying to take everybody's money, and you need to give it back. And that's what that would be the stereotyping of success in America. It's not about what a child does. It's not about the hard things that a child may go through it, and how that child grows up to be a corporation, a president of a corporation somewhere who's never had the big college education. And nothing wrong with the education by no means,
Of
but
course.
you take a child who just doesn't want to do it, doesn't have the desire to do it, but as sharp as a tack and as brilliant, he can make his own way or her own way to the
Yep.
top. How do you throw that out? I mean, is that any less value? No, that's just
Well,
the path that they went.
that's Common Core, right there.
Right.
Common Core.
Yeah.
It was designed, to prevent kids from falling behind. And what we have now is we have more kids falling behind, and we've restricted any advancement.
Yeah.
That is what we've done.
Yeah. In the world of finance, we would call that pay compression. You don't. It's a major compression issue. Nothing advanced. People get a pay raise, but the people at the bottom just drop more, and it just before you know, and it never catches up with each other. Like you said, it gets to a point to where nobody benefits except for those who have accomplished the least, by keeping those who are trying to accomplish the most. We've gone from a society that will reward independent thinking to a society now that challenges independent thinking and requires you to think like the government. If the government wanted you to think, they would have issued you the brain, not God, see. And they don't want you to think. It's kind of off of it. It's kind of like this, guns in schools, guns here, guns there. They don't want guns. They don't want guns, right? And I think Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson says it the best. You see these liberals, they don't want guns. You don't want your guns. They don't want guns. Don't take guns. You can't have guns. But guess what? You know why you can't get at the guns? It's because they want to take your guns. They want all the guns. So, and the same thing as we were talking, you can't get an education. They won't allow you to do X, Y, Z, but they want all the education.
That's right.
As it doesn't make, so no matter what you apply it to, the standard is across the board on everything. And that's a strategy. That is a left strategy that's always been there. And up until recently, and if I say it like this, up until 2016, up until we had another president, we didn't realize, I did, because I saw it in the school systems where I kept trying to tell people, watch out for the Antifa group. That's a strange group. When you start seeing Antifa T-shirts in high school in 2012, and then you look up at what it is, but then you hear what they tell you it is, and everything was anti-government. You're thinking, these kids don't know what you're talking about. And then in 2014, all of a sudden now it takes over a whole thing. And then you find out they're secretly recruiting in all your coffee shops, no matter what high-end, Starbucks, places like that. Why? Because it would be the most least suspecting place to see somebody. And that's how they built their issues. Well, people do that for many reasons, using various ways and locations and various people to build the same concept for other issues, because they can recruit these issues, build it, and before you know it, it's too strong, and now you got to fight it from the bottom up instead of being there to meet it head on. And I think so many times in our school systems, parents, up until recently, until we had our children being taught at home, did not know what was really going on in the schools. We thought they were going to go in there learning about George Washington and all the things about Valley Forge and how they were learning their math. I sat down with folks that do the math now, and I'm looking. Wait a minute, what direction are you going in with that math? And it looks like it's 20 more steps to get there when they only needed 3 steps in the first place. And I'm thinking, why would you teach a child 20 steps to get that math problem right, as opposed to the 3 normal steps that the average person can do?
Yeah.
There's reasons behind these things.
Well, I think one of the topical reason, and a lot of when you get into the policies, a lot of these changes, the first 2 or 3 sentences, you're like, oh, okay, that sounds nice. It sounds like compassion. It sounds like we're, watching out for our fellow man. And then you have to, it's almost like headline news, right? You hear the thing and it says, oh, new math going to help elevate low performing students. Oh, that sounds great. And then you get into it, you start reading it and you go, oh, okay. They're going to make it to the lowest denominator so that we have no high performers and no one able to excel through the curriculum because they're all learning this convoluted system where you got to take a block and break it up and put it together and do those things. I'm like, no, just write the numbers on paper and let's just add them up and let's go.
Right. Lower the standards. So you lower the standards, you equal the system. I mean, it's kind of like, you bring it down and finally you're in this little level there. But the standard was up here, but now the standard is here. And you know who's laughing more than anybody? The world. People in China, because their standard stays up here. And they have a very vigorous process for their education. They don't play the game about I don't understand it, So when the standard sits here, and then you got the rest of the world up here, that's going to leave us in a bad situation.
Well, I mean, I think we're 30 years now into social and emotional learning. And I was in a forum this past week, and there was about, violence in schools and social and emotional learning. I said, well, hey, can you point me to a study that shows either a growth or reduction in violence in schools post introduction of social and emotional learning? I haven't seen it yet.
Silence is golden, right?
Haven't seen it yet.
No, you won't.
But you want to go, when you were talking earlier about violence in schools, when the panel was, when everybody was here, and the pastor was here, when Vass was here, when you teach a child that their life happiness depends upon the acceptance or an opinion of another person, you have dissolved their sense of self, their sense of self-worth, and their sense of self-pursuit. And we're not built for that, Rick. Like we're not built to completely give up on ourselves. But when you force that, you are going to have very confused, very angry, very frustrated young people because they can't. They're told in school, they're told at home, oh, everyone loves you, everyone loves you, everyone loves you. But then you go and face reality, and you're like, well, wait, no one loves me.
Well, they don't even know who you are.
That's right. We're not teaching our kids how to be proud in themselves, how to be good, how to be good people, right? I'm not promoting, growing up to be a big jerk. What I am promoting though is that if you don't have a sense of self, you will never be productive in society.
Right.
So there is that missing thing, and social and emotional learning was constructed to help angry children deal with their anger better and lower the academic pressure and just kind of soften the emotional stress of being a child. And in my opinion, it's failed. It's been a test for 30 years. There's no real improvement. We have more violence, more school shootings, more young criminals. It's just not, it's time to put tangible goals and focus items back in the front seat of our education department, and emotional learning needs to kind of get in the back seat, maybe even the trunk, to be honest with you.
Right. Well, it's kind of like excellence in participation. As the participation trophy that counts. Oh, look, my child got a trophy, but did they win? You know,
Yeah.
and I love the fact my you know, I was just saying about. I've been told before that what second place, that's just the first loser.
First place loser. I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So it was like it's the first place loser, and I said, you know, come think about it, you're absolutely right. It's the first place loser. You know, so you know, it's kind of it's one of them things that if you allow your child to finish at that first place loser spot, you know, people say, "Oh well, you did great, you did good," and I understand that because you don't want to beat a child down for not being the best all the time and all that.
Yeah.
But you gotta want to give them enough incentive to want to win, and then teach them how to lose gracefully
That's right.
and how to come back and win again and not give up. So it's not about being a participant. It's about if you're going to be a participant, you know, you've got to put something behind that. You can't, you know,
Right.
you got to have a purpose behind it. I can participate every day and lose, but as long as I'm giving my best and I'm learning something by it, and face it, we may not do everything perfect, but you just can't say, "Oh, all I got to do is be there." Because if you take that in life, that's not going to work.
Yes. I taught people how to ballroom dance half my life.
Mhm.
And I was, well, still am pretty competitive, but I've trained some of our top competitors in our country. And one of the very first things when I take a student or a client on and we start talking about competitive sport, I tell them, I go, okay, here's the number one lesson you have to know and you have to understand. The only person you compete against is yourself.
Mhm.
And that's it. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. You push yourself, you support yourself, you put the work in, and then you know what? You let the chips fall where they fall because you're not going to win every day.
Live to
Right?
fight another day.
That's right. And so my clients, they would typically win and they would win really top awards, but they won because, well, the training was pretty good. I'm not going to, I won't be shy about that. The training was
Oh
pretty
yeah,
good, but they understood the concept that we're not going to worry about how someone else performs. We're going to put on our own show and
Mhm.
let people look in on us and determine whether or not we get first place.
Right.
And that was it. And we won lots. And it was
But
fantastic.
but if you took the old idea that you know, bring the expectation down so that people here feel good about themselves,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have been in that position.
Well, they also would have lost interest.
Right. Exactly.
They would
So
have
you know,
lost interest. We don't want to just stay stagnant. We're not people, even couch potatoes want something new to watch.
right.
We are
I mean,
always evolving.
and I think children now, and when you have to keep them interested, like you said, you got to keep them
Yeah.
interested. And I don't care what grade they're in. If they're not interested, they're not learning. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, being interested costs a child absolutely nothing.
Right.
You know, being curious, which is what children are. Let them be curious about education. Let them be curious about things they need to know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, we're talking reading, writing, arithmetic. We're talking about history. You know, there's time to go to world history, but a child at 5, 6 years old could care less about world history and not even going to remember it. You know, so you got to know what point and how it's structured so the child learns the best.
Mhm.
It's like me, certain topics that I'd go into. I wasn't a big fan of math, but I understood it. More importantly, I loved history.
Yeah.
I didn't like science, didn't like biology, didn't like none of that. Still don't like it. Never bored about it. So I goes, well, you know, science, this is great. I never
Yeah.
watched Star Wars. I didn't go into the spaceship movies and stuff. And it was like, you are weird. You've never seen Star Wars. I've never sat down and watched an entire movie of Star. I bought bits and pieces, and then before I just get up and walk off. It was just something that never interested me.
Yeah.
And my my son-in-law was like, "You're weird. You're really weird. Everybody likes Star Wars." I said, "Yeah, I watched it." He's like, "Oh, younger." I said, "Well, I was watching it before you were even born, so yeah, I was watching it the old style stuff." But the reality is, it's that interest that you have. Things do change. Things are
That's
changing.
right.
Whatever it is. But you got to find that interest that every child has, because not every child is going to have the same interest.
That's
And
right.
then you key in on that. And no matter what they're in, but there are certain things that they have to know, even though they may not be interested.
That's also true. And sometimes you got to be the bad guy and say, yeah, you got to learn that. Sorry.
You can't, yeah, you can't go, oh, honey, don't worry about it. You know, you don't like doing that. We don't want you to be miserable because, you know, we're a family. We are love and we're all this and we're great. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, your child's probably going to end up in prison. You know, people say, well, that's a little harsh. I said, well, you know what? It's reality, because a child's being told you don't have to follow any kind of authority and we're going to meet your standard.
Yep.
You don't have to meet ours.
And there are no repercussions.
That's right. You know, I probably shouldn't say, but I've been in restaurants and I watch children get out of chairs and start running around the restaurant. And the mom and dad are like, or the dad, oh no, you got to get over here. Now come back over here. Come back over here. We've done it, running around customers and everything else. And they'll put them up there and jump back down again. And I'm thinking, Lord have mercy. There's no structure there. So if they're not learning at home and then they go to school and they're being taught at school certain ways, you know, the poor child has no structure. Those children are going to struggle. That's just the way it is. But if they go back there and they get structure from the parents, and the schools aren't all wackadoodle, you're going to find that these children will be, you know, will excel in life and do great things. You know, and one thing about running a school board in these elections, man, after running in 3 elections, I tell somebody now, I said, look, man, just don't wear your feelings on your sleeve. Keep on rolling. On to the next spot. You know, have you found that you kind of like, people think you get upset about it? No, it's all right. Move on to the next one. Yeah.
And that's really all you can do. It's taking me a little bit longer to master that, because I'm cut from that, you know, that poverty, poverty neighborhood where, you know what, if you were hungry, sometimes you had to fight your older brother for the biscuit.
Yeah. So, it's like, yeah, especially when he's holding it above your head. And you got to
right, exactly. So for me, it's kind of like, oh, all right. But it's, you know, you really do have to, number one, remind yourself that we are still human, even if some people have intentions that are absolutely detrimental. You still got to remember that we're human.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all competitive. We're all competitive, and that makes the difference. So, you know, and I think, well, I hope that, you know, you like coming on the show, because I like to have you and the rest of the folks out there to come on the show. And it was kind of getting out the word and the information that we were doing it. And this is just something new. It's a new format for something local. And I think, you know, politics starts at the local level. Yeah. We'll talk about the national stuff, but if we don't start taking care of business at our local level, there's no hope for what we got going on. And if we can't establish a new baseline for what the expectations are for our very own children, mine are grown. And I still have a passion for watching children prosper. And, you know, on the left, you're not allowed to say that word. I think that's a dirty word, prosper. You can't say that. But I use that word, prosperity, prosper, all the time. And children need to know what those words mean. They don't change. We don't need to change dictionaries because it offends somebody way on the left side of the spectrum. You know, they need to change. They need to change and meet the standards of the world. The world shouldn't try to meet their standards, because that's nothing but a recipe for success.
Yep, I agree. That
might have just sounded like a sound bite, didn't it?
Sounded good to me, man. It sounded good to me.
It's like right. Well, I will find, you know, we'll get a lot of sound bites. Probably going to be a whole lot in that first section, so I get a chance to, you know, go ahead and watch it. You go back. But look, I'm glad you were here. Cool. Thank you very much. And like I said, spread the word. Let the folks know. Hey, I want you to come back again. Hey, I don't mind. We come out here. I'll get you back every time we're on air if you want to. You got the link. Or just let me know. And I'm going to try to do these shows. We're going to do them Tuesday nights generally. And we may pop in a show on a Thursday night or something. And if I have enough that want to get on here and talk about some of the issues that are going on as a school board, what would you do I'd like to have as many on here to find out what the entire school board would actually do if every one of y'all from the GOP side won. What would that look like? What would the school system look like? How would Wake County benefit from that?
Yeah.
Because I think that the bigger picture is if everybody got in that's running from the GOP side, what would the education and what would Wake County schools look like?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see. And you still got some time out there to get the message and the word out. And if there's times that you want to just check in and say, hey, Rick, can you give me 10 minutes? Can you give me 5? I don't care. I'll find a way. I'll send you. You check in, and if you got some events going on, let people know. I mean, that's, I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to go out there and even look at saying I'm going to go out and endorse candidates from the left and all this kind of stuff, because I can't get them. If they're not willing to come talk, they're not willing to stand up. They don't have a record.
They don't want anything tangible, Rick.
Right.
Anything tangible totally freaks them out.
Yeah, right. Because then you can hold them accountable. But I like the people who are willing to own it.
Well, awesome. I've got to get moving into like dad mode and.
I understand.
Brother, this is fantastic, and thank you so much for the invite. And
absolutely. Well, this will
I'll
be
in touch
going.
September 28th. I'll send you the graphic, and please post it out, man, because I think it's going to be a great night. It'll be a lot of energy. It'll be inspiring, and it'll be a chance. I'll be raising a little bit of money too, but that's more of a cost covering concern than a campaigning concern.
But that's what you got to do it anyway. That's what the campaigning is about.
That's true.
Never be embarrassed to ask for the money, because when you don't ask for it, the left does.
I guess that's true.
If you're not asking for it, somebody else on the left's going to get it. So make sure you get it first, because reality is, it is what it is, and politics suck. But you know what? I tell everybody, what's the term? Poly everywhere, right? Poly everywhere. Ticks, bloodsuckers. Politics everywhere, bloodsuckers. And everybody says, what? I said, I'm not talking about politicians. I'm talking about politics itself. It's a tough business.
Yeah.
And you got to wear it on your sleeve. And I say that, and I say that to be funny. But if you think about it, it's very draining. Politics can be very draining.
It is.
But you know what? I applaud you for doing it. Been there, done that. Thank you for stopping in. I hope this has been enjoyable for you. Thank you.
Nice.
And as you see,
the tough questions, like they were legit questions. So I like that, because so few people even ask a question that requires a legitimate response.
Exactly.
So I appreciate that.
We're not going to ask you fluff questions. We're going to ask you real questions about real issues. So we're going to be posting this. You'll see this feed go up. So feel free to share it with anybody and let everybody else see it. Again, thank you for stopping in. And like I said, I always tell everybody, says, well, I always wanted my own show. So when I say the Rick Padgett Show, I'm like, but I like what it says more than anything. It's your America. Thank you for being here.
I love it.
And thank you for talking about it. And we'll see you next time around. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Rick. Take care.
Okay, folks. Well, there you have it. Our first show I feel was a very productive show. As you can see behind me, I'm in my little makeshift office up here, and it's just, I usually can have some backgrounds back up there, but I keep it real. It is what it is, and it's reality. But hey, here we go. We're out there. We're going to send a message. We're going to take the message to you, the local folks. We'll talk to people all throughout the world that want to listen to this. I think we got some really good candidates in this school board race. I would recommend that you really do your research. If you love your children, you care about your children, and you worry about your children, then invest in your children. And the best way to invest is to invest a vote into the school board race. It gets very little attention, but it can have some of the best or worst concerns pop up about how your child is being educated. And those results are going to be based on how you vote, folks. So look at the people running for office. Look at the people willing to come on our show right here, right now, who are willing to ask, as you just heard one candidate say. We'll ask some tough questions. We'll listen to what you have to say, but those questions won't be easy. But that's what's going to make us different. We're not going to soft pedal. We're not going to pitch you a softball to hit out the park. We're going to keep it real. We're going to keep it going, and we're going to keep it. And like I said, I hope we keep it fast paced, and so it's very understanding about everybody. So without further ado, I would like to say thank you for stopping in. And as always, keep it real. Be real. Be safe. And always, always be ready, because you never know when the wolf is knocking at your door. And y'all have a wonderful evening. And thank you for being here.